A young man named Max Davis first met a woman named Annie in a bar that often held a game. Because they could answer questions together, they got to know each other and became a couple. Until one day Max proposed to Annie, and they got married. However, they still had no children and decided to consult a doctor. Annie said that Max was a little stressed because he had always lost to his older brother since childhood, which made him lack confidence, especially when he learned that his brother would return to their country. Max felt that his brother was cooler, more successful, and superior in every way, but Max didn't want to admit it. They returned home and met their neighbor named Gary, who was a police officer. Tonight, Max and Annie invited other friends to play games, but they didn't want to invite Gary because they didn't like him. They lied, saying they would just relax together tonight. That evening, Max and Annie prepared food. Max had asked his friends not to enter through the front door to avoid being seen by Gary. They didn't want to invite Gary because Gary was the ex-husband of their friend Debbie. Then Ryan sneaked in through the window with his date Madison. Likewise, the couple Michelle and Kevin arrived. Ryan always brought a different woman every time they gathered. Tonight they would play a guessing game. Then Max heard the sound of a sports car, which turned out to be his brother Brooks, who had just returned from Europe, driving Max's dream car, as if he were mocking Max. Then the actor named guessing game began. While playing, Brooks told an embarrassing story about Max when they were kids, making his friends laugh. Brooks scored 7 points. It was Max's turn to give clues, but none were guessed correctly because the clues Max gave were not understood by them. The game ended. The following week, Brooks invited them to the house he had rented. A week later, Max and Annie prepared to go to Brooks's house, and Gary asked if they were going to have a game night, meaning playing games at night, but Max lied, saying they were just going for dinner. Max and Annie entered the luxury housing complex. They were amazed by the luxury of the house. Their friends had already arrived, while Ryan came with a new woman named Sarah. Max brought some games, but they were discarded by Brooks. Tonight, Brooks had prepared a different game. They had to find a person before they were killed. Brooks had hired some people to help with the game tonight. As a reward for the person who found the victim, Brooks offered a red car to the winner. But they had to wait until they started the game. A few moments later, the door of Brooks's house was knocked, and Brooks opened it. The game began with Ron, playing as the FBI, giving some documents to them. The documents were clues to find the kidnappers. Suddenly, the door was forcibly opened by 2 masked men. They knocked Ron unconscious and continued to attack Brooks. Brooks pulled a gun from his sock. Since the others thought it was just acting, they just sat and watched the scene without intending to help. After Brooks was taken by the 2 kidnappers, the 6 of them started taking the clue books and paired up to begin solving the mystery of the kidnapping tonight. The clues contained a puzzle about something used to bind items, mostly white in color. Max and Annie decided to solve the mystery without following the rules. They tracked Brooks's phone, so they just had to go to Brooks's location now. Then Sarah saw Brooks's wallet and found a business card. Sarah got the idea to go directly to the service company hired for the game night and asked them to disclose who the kidnappers were. Meanwhile, Michelle and Kevin guessed the riddle and found a USB inside a stapler, but they had to solve another puzzle. Max and Annie. Arriving at a place, they did not find Brooks because his phone had been thrown into the trash. Max saw one of the kidnappers and followed him into a quiet bar, spotting Brooks. Annie pulled out a gun she had taken and threatened the bartender and the 2 kidnappers. Meanwhile, Sarah and Ryan had arrived at the office of the service company hired by Brooks. Even the receptionist named Glenda acted as an actor to scare Ryan and Sarah. They asked about the kidnapping mystery that Brooks had ordered, but Glenda would not tell them. Max pulled out a bill to bribe Glenda, but she did not accept it. Ryan, who only had $17, could not meet Glenda's demand for $100, so Sarah reluctantly handed over her money. At Brooks' house, 2 masked men came pointing guns. They were the actors hired for the game tonight, but the game was messed up because the 2 previous men were not Brooks' hires, and they realized Brooks was really kidnapped. Max and Annie did not know that those with them were real kidnappers. They casually released Brooks, who then said this was not a game. Brooks told the truth. He was not a businessman but merely a smuggler. Because of cheating, a mafia wanted to capture Brooks. Annie, not believing, played with the gun she thought was a toy and accidentally shot Max's hand. They rushed to free Brooks and then fled the scene. Brooks was honest about his work. Brooks bought and sold illegal items on the black market like a criminal. Brooks made a mistake by betraying a ruthless Bulgarian mafia. Brooks was about to sell a Fabergé egg to another buyer named Marlon Freeman, who was willing to pay twice as much. Then the two kidnappers continued to chase them. Not wanting to endanger his brother, Brooks decided to get out of the car so Max and Annie could be safe. Annie called Michelle and told her the truth. Annie, with the help of a YouTube video, tried to remove the bullet from Max's hand, but she did not find a bullet. Upon checking, the bullet had already passed through Max's hand. They all gathered at Max's house and began to plan to save Brooks. Freeman was just an alias, so they needed to find out his real identity. Ryan said they could find an identity in the police database. Annie then remembered someone, and now they went to Gary's house. They decided to invite Gary to play tonight. Max sneaked into Gary's room to access his computer. Max tried typing Gary's ex-wife's name as the password and succeeded. Max obtained Marlon's real name, which was Donald. Without realizing it, the wound on Max's hand was bleeding, staining the carpet and Bastian the dog's fur. Max tried to clean the bloodstains, but instead of disappearing, it further soiled Bastian's fur and made Gary's room a mess. Finally, Max decided to leave Gary's house and head to Donald's house. Max received a call from the kidnapper asking him to meet at a certain place. But before that, they would search for the Fabergé egg at Donald's house. They saw that a common game among the rich was having two people fight each other for betting purposes. They began to scatter to find the egg. Ryan spotted the egg in a safe. Ryan recklessly decided to take it, thinking that everyone's attention was on the two fighters. After he managed to grab the egg, one of the fighters fell right at his feet, and he was caught. Ryan immediately ran, followed by his friends, and they worked together to get the egg out of Donald's house and escaped. Unfortunately, the egg broke as it slipped from Max's hand. Then Annie found a piece of paper containing several names. They reached the place specified by the kidnapper, who demanded that they lie down under threat of being killed. Brooks began to confess that he had been a bad person and always cheated Max in every game. Max had always envied Brooks and wanted to be like him, while Brooks felt Max was luckier because he could attend university, had a good career, and had a wife like Annie. This game night was designed by Brooks so Max could win and get the car prize. Even the car keys were already in Max's jacket. Shortly after, Gary arrived to save them all. They all thanked Gary, but suddenly Gary was shot. Annie and Max were saddened. They urged Gary to hold on and promised that if Gary survived, they would include him in every game night and never ignore him again. Hearing this, Gary took out a blood capsule from his mouth. It turned out Gary was only pretending to be shot, and the two kidnappers were Gary's men. They still couldn't believe this was part of Gary's game. Annie then showed the paper she found. Gary read it and saw that it contained names of people in the witness protection program. However, before Gary could finish speaking, he was shot again. Two strangers arrived looking for Brooks. They wanted the list of names, but Brooks swallowed the paper to prevent them from getting it. Only Brooks was taken by the two men. Max and Annie prepared to rescue Brooks, using the red car that would become Max's. They reached the airport and saw the plane about to take off. With courage, Max stopped the flight even though it meant damaging his car. Mr. Bulgarian's men came out to attack them, but Annie managed to knock him out. Max entered the plane and fought with Mr. Bulgarian. Annie called the police but saw that Max was struggling, so she decided to board the plane too. However, the henchman who had been knocked out regained consciousness and aimed at Annie. Max accidentally activated the plane's engine switch, causing the engine to start, and the Bulgarian henchman was sucked into the propeller. Annie then managed to knock out Mr. Bulgarian. Max and Annie's mission to save Brooks was successful. 3 months later, they gathered at the Brooks house, revealing that Brooks had managed to retrieve the paper and sold the list for $3 million. Max was speechless. They then started the game, and Gary joined them along with Dr. Chin, who had become Brooks's girlfriend. There, Annie announced her first pregnancy during a word-guessing game. Finally, after waiting so long, Annie and Max were going to have a child, and the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.